Dodge. I'm the social media coordinator here at the Royal Ontario Museum, and I'm very excited today because we're trying something a little different with our Google Hangouts. We've actually got Stuart and Jacqueline from the Art Gallery of Mississauga on the line here. Say hi, guys.
Hello, welcome.
And I have here with me Dr. Dipali Dewan, who is the Senior Curator of South Asian Art and Culture. And we wanted to do this hangout today with the Art Gallery of Mississauga because they've also got a focus right now on South Asian art and culture. Stuart is the I'm gonna read his bio here because it's quite impressive. He's an artist, curator, educator, and writer with a defined history of engagement with the art and public space, community development, and extreme arts administration. He's currently the director and chief curator at the Art Gallery of Mississauga. And before that, he held various senior management positions in art institutions in Chicago, Seattle, Atlanta, London in the UK, and Paris. Right now, Stuart, you have an exhibit on. I wondered if you could talk about it a little bit for us. It's a curatorial research project that aims to initiate a critical discourse and presentation by exploring locational identity, with a focus on South Asian culture. Maybe you could expand upon that a little bit for me?
Yeah. So the exhibition is inspired by the social fabric of the city of Mississauga. So if we have 53% of Mississauga speaking Urdu, Hindi, or Punjabi, among other languages, that begins to kind of situate the Art Gallery of Mississauga in an interesting way. And it also makes me question what is the relevancy of the gallery in Mississauga at this time. And so in a sense, I'm wanting just to use this as a research project. The exhibition is entitled 01191, 01192. These are the telephone calling numbers to India and Pakistan. And so how to begin kind of opening up emerging artists, established artists all together, have this conversation about global identity, but using Mississauga or using Canadian identity, with second and third generation Canadians, as a kind of way of talking about a geographical divide, if you will. What is it to be South Asian? What is it to be Canadian? What is it to be the global citizen? And so the part that I'm most interested in is the question about what is it to be a global citizen? Because it seems Canadian ideology or Canadian, we are allowed to embrace our identity in a different way. All people come to this country. It's not like the American sensibility where it's a melting pot, you disappear. Rather, we are truly a mosaic country. I kind of rambling a little
bit. That's fine. No, that's
the idea.
No, it's great to. I think it's really important to have a to have that conversation in our institutions. I think it's it's something that doesn't get talked a lot. I think, and maybe it should. Dipali, your exhibit right now. Sorry, I should introduce Dipali Dewan. She's our senior curator of South Asian art and culture. She does a lot of work with identity as well, visual identity, photography, and her exhibit right now is basically done after a decade of work on an individual who really sort of started visual identity in India, if I could put it that way. Can you talk a little bit about the exhibit and how that works?
Yeah, no, it's kind of funny because the one exhibit that we have on at the ROM right now that I did is kind of like, 01191, 01192 circa 19th century.
Interesting.
And so, 150 years ago, and it's kind of looking at the beginnings of photography through the work of this one photographer from the 19th century named Raja Deen Dayal. I've been working on him for 10 years with my colleague, Deborah Hutton, who's at the College of New Jersey. It did not start as a 10-year project, believe me. I think we had expected it to be wrapped up in a few years, but there's so much work of his that survives that it just lasted longer. But the amazing thing about his photographs is he was one of the few people at the time, going around with a camera, which was a new technology. And nowadays, here we are on Google Chat, photography and the camera is second nature to us. If we can't do these kinds of things, we're like, what's wrong with the world? But in some ways, I wanted to look at an era where the camera felt totally new and a photographic image was totally new. I actually have come to strongly believe that we have no idea what that's like in today's world. It's like we've lost a connection, we've lost contact with the sense of photography as new. It just is not there because it's all around us all the time. We're producing it ourselves, we're looking at it, our identities are constructed through it, I would argue. So much so that, it's what I like to say, it's the water of our fishbowl. But so anyway, it's kind of interesting to put the two shows next to each other, and in some ways very cool that they're on at the same time.
Do you think that, because I automatically think of, obviously I'm not a scholar on this topic like you are, but I'm just curious, there's this point of modernism where the photography, the daguerreotype, the Western Europe, photography in Europe. We have examples of photography mainly which are cited from Paris as the kind of beginning part of, I guess, modernism with the image to some degree. And then you've been doing this scholarly work which is centered on this photographer who has been documenting 19th century India. Correct?
Yeah. In some ways, it's been focused on one guy only because that's kind of, it's a portion that's manageable to deal with. But I've kind of used his work as a way to explore the whole 19th century world. And you mentioned this kind of idea of the beginnings of modernism and the daguerreotype, and largely being focused in some ways in Western Europe and North America. And one of the things that I've tried to look at, is how was modernism different in other parts of the world? And Raja Deen Dayal is an example of how it could be different, and what are the different kinds of visual strategies an artist there was using. Now, having said that, one of the other things that I found is that, nowadays we kind of try to make this big separation between East and West, us and them, and all of that stuff that we think globalization is breaking down. But what I found is that in the 19th century, there was also similarities back then, and people were starting to be global in a way different from today, but still global. And Deen Dayal was an example of someone in northern India that never left India, but he was totally savvy and it accessed all of the latest photography technology through publications from Western Europe that were circulating around, and in some ways he used some of the things from there, but he also innovated his own. So I find this kind of simple separation between East and West, or a desire to find what is it unique about the East that's not like the West, in some ways a bit artificial. And so when you go back and you look in the archive, you'll find both differences, but you'll find similarities too. And it's easy to ignore those, but really interesting to pay attention to them too.
And I think this plays well into the exhibit you have on right now, Stuart, where where location plays into the perspective of the artist and how they, the art that comes from them. I wonder if maybe you could comment on that a little bit. Sorry if I interrupted you, but.
No. I was going to just talk about Mansour, who also has a retrospective at the Art Gallery of Mississauga concurrently with 011. And Mansour, too, I mean, this is an artist who located in India. And then with the 011 exhibition, we have out of 8 artists, 1 artist who's educated in India. And so there's, what's interesting, Avanta Kapawa and Mansour were able to have interesting language of Indian modernism and what it is, how the subcontinent began to absorb these ideas or develop ideas. Whereas the other artists in 011 are doing it more from a Canadian perspective, and maybe that's based on their education or their identity. There's so many things that's spinning through my head, I can't possibly say them all. Used to that. So I think there's just so many ideas. Yeah, I'm just going to ramble. Next.
Yeah, no, it's actually interesting what you're saying, and this whole idea of 9121, 92, which is India and Pakistan. In some ways, the show we have at the ROM is a time when India and Pakistan didn't exist yet. Mm-hmm. That's kind of an interesting, juxtaposition that brings out another issue of kind of location and identity, and how does your identity change as location changes. We think of location as this fixed thing, but locations, change all the time. Mansaram's work that is up at AGM right now is a really interesting thing because, he's a senior artist.
Yes.
Who migrated to Canada decades ago, and in many ways has been producing work that is a result of both his training in India as well as his location in Canada, and not just Canada, I would say, suburban Ontario.
Yeah.
Right? And in fact, there's a lot of senior artists, I think, from other parts of the world who come here.
Yes.
And, are located not in urban centers, but in suburbs or, towns farther afield of the metro. And they have this, there's almost this kind of new kind of contemporary coming out of their experience. Mansaram, for example, had interactions with Marshall McLuhan early on when he was here. And in many ways, I feel that kind of story, it's not the exception, it's the norm. Picasso in Africa, they're not the exception, it's the norm of modernism.
But at the same time, with Mansaram being in Toronto when he immigrated here in the 70s and McLuhan, and then exporting himself to Oakville, there is something about how the GTA operates as hub, or the Toronto operates as the hub, whereas I meet really interesting artists who live in the suburb, because that's where I am when I'm here at the AGM. Although we don't call it the suburb, we call it the GTA, or the hub. Escapism, but with that escapism is that I, like you're saying, senior artists who've been working for years and they have a plethora of work and ideas and experience. And I think that Mansaram does capitalize on. This is an artist who's working and still making work, and he wanted all this work in the show. And I'm like, you only have 4 walls. You can only get a wrong. Where you only have this much space. But at the core of his identity is that he is an Indian artist, educated in India, but he is Indian, and he's very clear establishing himself as a Canadian. I find that really interesting. So working on 011 in the Mansaram retrospective, there is this more conversation happening, and that duality is really kind of fascinating, because you see it with the younger generation of artists in 011 at the same time. So I wonder what an artist like Ishan Rafi will be doing in 25 years. What will Levant will be doing in 30 years. This is really fascinating. I love the conversation.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Next.
Is it so? Does that sounds like a new exhibit? Maybe sometime down the road, there, Stuart. A little,
We are doing what's interesting about? I mean, we can just talk about anything we want, right?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Is that the AGM is undergoing a reanimation, as I like to say, and with that comes the excuse and the reasoning for showing and building a relationship with an artist like Mansaram, who I feel is underappreciated, underrecognized, he's a Canadian icon, really, on so many levels. The work in the show shows a progression from 1963 all the way to last, 2012. So within that progression, you see this level of sophistication where he has not been really given due, in a sense. I don't know, I'm just kind of rambling, but the AGM is about opportunity and about working in the city fabric and about pulling artists in from the 905, transplanting and putting artists from Toronto in the 905 and altering their experience at the same time. So we have these residency projects, these curatorial projects happening. For me, I look at the AGM as a research laboratory, if you will, and that's for all people, even a position to Jacqueline, she's the communications person, who's responsible for how the gallery moves forward. But at the same time, it's an inspirational note, and it's also we are investigating the platform. I guess I'm just, how is it that institutions can begin to collaborate in new ways? Let's move aside from vocational identity. Talk about something more institutional. I'm not supposed to do that.
You can if you like. I mean, this is one way that we're looking at sort of collaborating between institutions. I think if we're going to switch gears a little bit, I just want to just mention that something I should have mentioned as a good social media coordinator at the start of this hangout. For people that are watching, you can watch on our YouTube channel, on the website, or through Google+. You can also follow along on Twitter. The hashtag is ROMHang. If you want to ask any questions to Stuart or to Polly, just do it through Twitter if you like. You can also follow DePauli on Twitter. Her handle is @DePauliDuan. And you can also follow Stuart on Twitter. His handle is @STUTZ. We're Canadian, so Z. ART. StutZ. And we have a little bit of activity on the Twitter, but no real questions yet. So if you have any questions, let us know. But I think if we're going to talk a little bit about institutional collaboration, Jacqueline and I had talked about this hangout for a few months, and it just sort of made sense for us because we had two exhibits going on at the same time that sort of dealt with the same area, the same issues, and we thought it might be a really easy way to get two experts together to talk about what was going on in their galleries. Other than maybe a few technical difficulties, it looks like there's a bit of an echo, but we deal with it as we can. I think this is one tool that we could use maybe a little more with colleagues around the world to talk about sort of those issues of modernism and things that you were mentioning earlier.
Right, and in many ways, this is a conversation in some ways that Stuart and I have already started. Mm-hmm. And I think this is a conversation we'll see more and more between Toronto and 905. And as I think, I'm constantly blown away by the amount of things that are happening in the 905. And I think the 905 is going to transform the 416, in fact, and end up, impacting it and transforming it. And I think, for me at least, I'm waiting to see a history of Canadian art written, including the 905.
That's interesting. That is interesting. What I find fascinating is that artists who are from Mississauga will often move to 416 because it just makes sense. That's the art of the GA. But at the same time, having that dual identity, if you will, 905 and 416, there is more opportunity living in Mississauga because there's not that many artists, because they're all moving east. Those who stay are able to carve out much more opportunity. They're able to kind of cling on to grants in a much more accessible way than the competing factor in the 416. I find that kind of fascinating because, I'm not saying 905 is a land of opportunity, but I think if you're an emerging artist, definitely 100%. Yeah. Curators.
Yeah.
I think one thing I wanted to talk about is there's an artist, Sumira. Did you have a question?
No, go ahead, Stuart.
Samara Tazeen, who recently moved from Pakistan to 905. She's based in Oakville. This is an artist who was educated to be a miniature painter, and having come to Canada, her work has transformed itself. In the gallery, there's a mandala made out of gold leaf that took her 72 hours to make. And it's this very gentle Fibonacci sequence, if you will, just these small dots composed over a 10-foot radius. Very beautiful. Using that technique, wanting to remove herself from miniature painting, but wanting to bring the labor with her. And I found that really fascinating watching her make this work. She was very clear about the contemporary approach to that, and she still thought of it, though, as a miniature painting, which I found really interesting, because then I wondered, so if 10 foot is a miniature for you now, what is the next step? How does that begin to move forward, and how can I switch you? Yeah, so that's a good conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And in some ways also, you know, with her work, it does, you know, and in some ways even the works of Deen Dayal, where do you draw that line between what we think is traditional and what we think of as contemporary? And I find even photographs from back 100 years ago start questioning that. So I feel like you start seeing this genealogy of where what is the past and the present starts to break down in a moment about 100 years ago.
Nice.
And I think that's very much a part of what we would call, you know, our own kind of contemporary sense of self.
Yeah, interesting. How long is the exhibition up for?
The exhibition at the ROM called Princely India and the British Raj. Between Princely India and the British Raj, the photography of Raja Deen Dayal is going to be on view till early January 2014.
Okay.
And yours?
Through September 7th. Yes.
Yeah. You can, Polly and I had, when the exhibit opened, we had some visitors come because you had a bit of a collaboration with Deborah Hutton, it was, in the U.S., and then I forget the institution. It was a private archives in India.
It's an archive called the Al-Qazi Collection of Photography. The curator there, Rahab Alana, came from Delhi. And we were able to loan about 50 works of Deen Dayal's work from Delhi. In fact, also about 40 works came from the Peabody Essex Museum. So it's a show that brings together multiple collections that you won't see happen again anytime soon. And then we were very lucky enough to have the photographers, Raja Deen Dayal's great-great-grandson, come from India to Toronto for the launch of the exhibition and the book. And so, and those, in fact, we made a few YouTube videos that are up on the ROM's channel.
Yeah, they're also on the Polly's staff page too. So if you want to check out those, they're great. They're just nice informal conversations with the collaborators.
You might have to turn your audio up a little bit.
Yeah, but we did it while the museum was open. So I think at one point someone walks right through the.
I'm sure.
the video, but
that's real.
Yeah, exactly. So what's upcoming for the AGM? We have a few minutes left. I wonder if you guys could just give us sort of a splash of what's happening next.
Sure. During the exhibition, we have over 50 activities which relate back conceptually to the exhibition. 011 Montserrat. Everything from how to eat a mango to an architectural tour of spiritual places in the 905 being organized by Sana Salim. We have tons and tons of things happening all the time, but they always relate back to the exhibition in really interesting ways. We're using the geography of the city as a playground to learn more about things, but also incorporating art and ideas into that experience. We did just get a question.
It was a question from the wrong hand hashtag. I'd love to know the public's answer as well. at Christie _ fan asks, how do you draw the line between traditional and contemporary? And what role do photographs play in that?
Did you get that?
I didn't
to Polly?
quite hear that.
Just right here, this one.
How do you draw the line between traditional and contemporary? Was that it?
Photography.
Yeah, right here.
In photography, I don't.
What role do photographs play?
I don't draw a line between traditional and contemporary. I think that's kind of the point, and that's what I think artists in the modern and contemporary period have been telling us through their work, especially, you know, like artists like Sumera Tizine, who was in the AGM show. What role do photographs play? That's would take another hour, I think.
How about if we use Sunil Gupta as a backdrop?
Well, okay, I mean, for me, what drew my interest to focus on photographs in my research, at least in the last little while, has really been more than any other medium. And I would say photographs and any photo-based medium. So its extension is film, TV, video, things like that. So you have still photography and moving photography. That is the one medium that is around us 24/7 all the time. And it affects the way we think about the world and the way we think about ourselves in ways that is extremely hard to be self-conscious of. It impacts our sense of self and our identity. It shapes who we are, what we buy, what we think, many times, the relationships we have with not only things and locations, but people as well. It penetrates, I think, both the public and private, and there's nothing like it. And so for me, that aspect, its pervasive nature, is what draws my fascination and to want to understand it better and want to understand how it functions better. In some ways, it's hard to say. It's better to say what role don't photographs play. You could maybe come up with a bit of a list, but really the impact that they have, especially today, is massive. Now, I think one question is really interesting. That's kind of something I've been thinking about more and more lately. Is it seems to me as photographs become more and more pervasive, people's shock over the manipulation of photographs also becomes more and more heightened. It's like it's sort of a contradiction, or almost ironic, that in many ways in this day and age, when all of us have the ability to take and manipulate photographs, when they are out there in the public sphere, let's say a news magazine, and we find out that they've been manipulated, there's like a public outcry or shock. Now, those two things are kind of interesting, and I feel like it has to do with the nature of the photograph and how it works and what we expect from it. It has more to do with us and our expectations than about the photograph itself. Maybe I can mention that, you know, there's another exhibition going on at the ROM right now focused on photography, and that's called Genesis. It's the photographs of Sebastião Salgado, a very important contemporary photographer, and it features images he took from around the world, going to places that he saw as pristine areas that hadn't been yet affected by the long and destructive hand of modern progress and development. And he's trying to capture these images as a way to inspire all of us to help protect these areas. Now, his photographs bring up a lot of interesting issues about photography in general, too. You know, where was he when he took this? You know, what was the circumstances? How did he get to that location? You know, how did he take that photograph of a herd of buffalo from above? You know, that all things like that. How did he get that, you know, 10 zebras standing all in a line? I think we're all, in some ways, very savvy about photography today, but there's also certain expectations we bring to it. In some ways, we haven't gotten caught up with the technology itself. Now that's going way far afield from the topic of the conversation we were supposed to do.
That's good though. It's good to sort of talk about all these different issues at play, and you know, again, maybe there's more substance there for future discussions and exhibits. You guys, I think we've pretty much run out of time. Do you guys have anything else you wanna throw in there?
No, it's just interesting to have. We should have more.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I just want to say thank you very much, Stuart and Jacqueline, for taking part in this little experiment with us. I really appreciate it. 011 is on until September. What's the exact date?
September
7th.
September 7th.
September 7th, and Dean Dial continues until the fall.
Early January.
Early January. Lots of time. Thanks again, guys, and we'll talk to you later.
Bye. Thank you.